Marvel's Spider-Man was my 2018 Game of the Year, a game that clicked every button for what I would want out of a superhero game, and then some. So naturally, when a sequel was announced focused solely on Miles Morales, our second Spider-Man, I knew right then and there that I had to set time aside to review it. Does Miles Morales live up favorably to the first game's incredibly high bar, even knowing that it's a smaller and slightly cheaper game? No. But it's still really good in its own right, and I'll explain why and tell you whether I think you should buy this game or not in today's spoiler-free review. Spoilers, yes, you should buy this game. For those out of you that may have forgotten or missed the first Spider-Man's ending, we find out that Miles was, like Peter Parker before him, bitten by a radioactive spider, and by the end of that game's DLC story, we got to see the very start of our new Spider-Man's training. Just like how that DLC took place a few months after the main game, Miles takes place in the winter, months after the events of the DLC are in the rear view. In fact, a good amount of this game takes place on Christmas Day, so expect to see a bunch of Watch Mojo Christmas video games list featuring this game later this year. If you're hoping to see some spider camaraderie between our two heroes or anything of that sort, you're gonna have to wait another year or two, because Peter spends most of this winter in Europe with MJ, leaving Miles alone to keep New York safe as the city's only Spider-Man. This adventure isn't intended as a Spider-Man 2, it's a story meant to establish our new hero and show the struggles that come with being a hero. You can see Miles' inexperience in his every motion, whether he's flailing around when swinging or when he's fighting hordes of baddies. The animations here do a great job of constantly reminding you that, yeah, he's still a kid coming to terms with his abilities. Of course, Miles doesn't just get an easy ride to becoming a hero where he just fights a couple baddies here and there. It wouldn't be a Spider-Man game without some gang warfare between two rival factions. In the year after the first game's events, a new energy corporation, Roxxon, has moved into a huge building in Harlem after innovating a new, clean type of energy. Also in the previous year, a group known as the Underground has sprung up in the hole left behind after the city's gangs were broken apart by the first Spider-Man. And either they just don't like Troy Baker's voice,
duty calls,
or something is going on behind Roxxon's walls and armed mercenaries that they really want to unveil. Either way, Miles has to juggle these competing factions while keeping appearances up in his personal life, reconnecting with his old middle school friend Finn, hiding his double identity from his mom while she runs for election in Harlem, the usual Spider-Man dual identity stuff. Miles tells a leaner, more personal story than the original game, while doing a good job to at least distance itself a little bit from the usual beats of a Miles Morales plot. If you've seen Spider-Verse before, and by the way, if you haven't, you definitely should, you're going to catch on to at least one major plot point right away, but the writing does a great job both at swerving your expectations and introducing new versions of classic characters both from past Miles Morales stories and classic Peter Parker ones. I really loved this game's portrayal of just about every character. I loved seeing Miles come into his own as Spider-Man, seeing his mistakes and how he learns from them, seeing his friend Genki as his right-hand tech guy. Miles' mom Rio might be the game's standout performance. Again, I can't say much if I don't want to spoil things, but everybody brings their A-game to this story. Make no mistake though, that lean story is significantly shorter than the original game. By my count, the main plot alone took almost exactly 6 hours, and with all of the side content included, I hit 100% completion in somewhere around 8 or 9, shorter than even just the main runtime of Peter's story. Well, actually, now that I think about it, maybe it was a little bit more than 9 hours just because of the awful stealth challenge missions. And yes, those are back, but thankfully there are only 9 challenge missions in total this time around, and they're all a bit better designed than the first games. By the time you're watching this video, I'll very likely already have the Platinum Trophy for this game, only a day after I first got my PS5. Then again, to be fair, I also did get the Platinum for the original Spider-Man in just about a day too, so I might just be insane. The game being shorter, keep in mind, isn't a bad thing at all. I got my $50 worth out of it, and I'm excited to go back to my New Game Plus playthrough once this video starts rendering. Miles does what it needs to and gets out before it gets too bloated, and I honestly kind of appreciate that. It's just one of those expectations that you have to have going in that Miles isn't going to be some earth-shattering next-gen experience, it's simply a tighter standalone tale to build us towards the absolute blowout that Spider-Man 2 seems like it's going to be. And to some extent, this lighter amount of content is actually kind of an improvement over the original game, where there were so many pieces of side content, and collectibles, and challenges, and enemy bases, and crimes, and crimes, and crimes, and crimes, and crimes, that even as somebody who absolutely adored that game, I'm not excited to go back and punch through all of those in the remaster. You can see clear reception to feedback and improvements from the first game, such as cutting down on those insane amount of random optional crimes that Spidey dealt with, and instead pushing Miles to live up to that nickname of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Random crimes will still pop up when you're not inside a mission, but instead of swinging aimlessly through the city trying to find them, Genki created a smartphone app for people to essentially call 911, but just for Spider-Man. I really adored this change because it meant that the optional, arguably fillery side missions were instead hidden as these smaller tasks, only a swipe of the touchpad away if you wanted to do them. This in turn means that there are far fewer, but far more substantial, proper side quests compared to the original game. We're still not really seeing that Arkham-styled rogues gallery appearing in the side quests like some players may want though, but most of the side missions set up even more plot threads for whenever Spider-Man 2 does land. And while we're on the topic of improvements, thanks to Miles' powers of invisibility and the much improved enemy AI, stealth is a viable strategy for just about every non-boss fight encounter. Where in the first game you could stealth through maybe the first wave of a gang hideout, but then extra waves would just come in and it would be a regular fight anyway, here most fights are one continuous battle, and you can take everybody out quietly if you want to go that route. The enemy variety is also greatly improved from the first game, or at least the shorter runtime makes it feel that way. I was waiting for the entire game for shield enemies to start showing up, just waiting for the fights to maybe start bloating out a bit, but that moment never came even when the shield guys do show up right near the end. On the other side of the spider coin, since Miles isn't as varied a fighter as Peter is yet, much of the upgrade tree is going to feel very limited, and I simply didn't find the same groove with the different suits and abilities as I did with the PS4 game. Part of that is simply because the game is so short that whatever combination of suit abilities you choose really doesn't matter, and by the time you can unlock all of them, the game's already essentially over. But I can't help but feel that the abilities themselves focus so much on Miles' new powers, despite the game not exactly giving a ton of situations where a specific suit loadout would be particularly useful. As a result, many of these suit upgrades kind of feel a bit redundant, but maybe I'll feel differently during my second playthrough. In combat, Miles only has 3 gadgets on top of his web shooters, those being a hologram, a gravity well, and trip mines, none of which feel nearly as useful in combat as Peter's awesome gadgets. However, Miles more than makes up for that with his new Venom powers. No, not that Venom, that's just the incredibly innocent and not at all foreshadowy name that Miles chose for his new electricity powers. Throughout the adventure, Miles unlocks a whole suite of bioelectricity-based powers, which are conveniently super effective against the Underground's programmable matter armor. So while on one hand I miss being able to jump between a bunch of different, all really useful gadgets as Peter, Miles just shreds through enemies with great crowd control attacks. It makes me even more excited for the next game when you'll almost certainly be able to play as, and maybe even swap between both during fights. In fact, the game already teases a bit of that in a couple missions when you're fighting alongside somebody. You're never told or anything, but if you use a finisher attack during those missions, you'll team up with your partner for some awesome combo finishers. It's such a great touch. Plus, Miles' crowd control playstyle is perfect considering that this game definitely feels like it has more enemies attacking you on screen all at once, at least on the PS5 version. And that brings me to Miles Morales' next-gen presentation, which, of course, is where this game stands out. Insomniac's new face capture tech is leaps and bounds above the PS4 games, with some characters and scenes looking just wow. There are also still a few Uncanny Valley scenes, so they do still have a bit of work to do there, but for the most part, Insomniac's already high production value was clearly kicked up a notch. And I know that it's been dunked on all across the internet leading up to release, but I have to say that in motion, Peter Parker's new face looks fine here. He doesn't look nearly as young or as Tom Hollandy in motion as he did in screenshots and the short bursts we'd seen up until release. The game makes great use of the DualSense's controller abilities as well, always subtly vibrating in tune with slams and footsteps and whatnot in the game, using the resistance feedback on the triggers when swinging to really give you that extra kick of immersion as you feel the controller vibrating like the web lines that Miles is swinging on. If the visual bump doesn't get you going, the controller definitely will. I'll talk more about the controller when I cover Astrobot next week though, so stay tuned for that. Like many PS5 games are going to have, at least at launch, Miles lets you choose between a 4K fidelity mode, which runs at 30 frames per second but features more and better visual effects, full ray tracing, all the buzzwords you've heard a million times this year, and a 1080p 60 frame per second performance mode, which ironically runs worse, at least for me, but we'll get into that in a sec. Just about all the footage you've seen in today's video is captured from that fidelity mode, while my second playthrough I've been rolling with performance mode. In fidelity mode, the luminescence of the Venom modes is enough to make you say wow even when you're smashing dudes into walls. This is obviously a cross-gen game, but it feels like a next-gen experience when you see those huge moments when 1,000 things are happening and there's not a tick of slowdown, or when you can see beams of colored light reflecting off of Miles' suit. It's all just awesome. Performance mode doesn't make a huge difference if you're not playing on a 4K TV though, so I wouldn't knock you for going either way on this one. I just kinda wanted my first PS5 game to use the console's whole power. The final thing I'll note on the presentation front goes back to what I said about the performance mode running worse. I'm kind of hoping this was just a weird fringe case, but for whatever reason, after I rolled credits, I ran into significant performance issues when swinging through the city, both when I was doing my last bit of cleanup in my fidelity mode file, and even more so when running in 60 FPS mode on New Game Plus. Before that, my experience was absolutely flawless, so I have no idea if I ran into some kind of memory leak or something. I think that seems to be what it was, since resetting my PS5 seems to have helped it, but I'm gonna keep a cautious eye on that second playthrough, and I'll update my pinned comment if performance mode does continue to give me those chugging issues. So to wrap up, I loved my time with Spider-Man Miles Morales, and it's exactly the kind of game that Insomniac has said it was this entire time. A smaller, standalone adventure to set up Miles' journey as a hero and help us kickstart what'll inevitably become Spider-Man 2. If you play this game knowing it's exactly that, you're in for a blast of a time. However, if you go in hoping for a grander adventure to the style of Spider-Man 1, you'll get a couple set pieces that absolutely do bring it close to that, but you'll walk away a bit disappointed when it doesn't last as long as you were hoping. That said, as much as I loved it, and even though I went in with tempered expectations, I think I wanted just a little bit more out of the game so that it could stand out from the shadow of Peter Parker's game. There are some really fun puzzles that use Miles' bioelectricity, but it's barely used. I mean, the guy actually has electricity, and yet he doesn't have an electric web attack in combat, despite that being a gadget from the first game. There are a couple missed opportunities just like this, or I suppose if you're a glass half full kind of person, a couple things they may be saving for down the road. Spider-Man Miles Morales greatly improves on the side content by cutting down on the fat and using the Friendly Neighborhood Spider app to sort of tuck them off into the corner. And although I don't love the new suite of suit abilities, I absolutely loved how the game played in spite of that, so much so that, like I said, I'm already most of the way through a New Game Plus run within 24 hours of starting. If you've got a PS5, there's no reason not to have Miles Morales if you don't already, and while I can't speak to the PS4 version's performance, at $50, it's a great holiday title no matter how you cut it. Although, now that I say that, were this game not one of only a few launch games, there is a good chance that its short length would be a much bigger complaint for me, so perhaps if you're picking it up on the PS4, you might run into the same complaint. Thank you all very much for watching, especially if you've made it this far. Hopefully, if you were on the fence about the game, I've helped you make up your mind with Miles Morales, and if you're already playing the game, be sure to give your thoughts in the comments, especially if they differ from mine. Make sure to call me a mean name too, or else this wouldn't be YouTube comments. If you're new to the channel or you're not already subscribed and you would want to, make sure to hit that stupid button for more videos just like this in the coming weeks, and for the rest of the year for that matter. I've got Sackboy and Astrobot in the wings ready to go soon, and I'm still toying at looking at Spider-Man Remastered because I've still got the itch for Spider-Man gameplay. If there's anything else you want to see me cover either on the PS5 or elsewhere, let me know. As always, until next time, stay golden. And a special thanks to all of my patrons who make videos like this possible as quickly as I can make them. A special thanks in particular to Goldstorm07, Terminally Nerdy, Matthew0606, Wolf Chaosan, and Buckles Chucklow. If you'd like to see your name on this list and get access to the Golden Bolt Discord server, among other benefits, visit patreon.com/thegoldenbolt. Thank you.